In today's video, we're going to be looking at the best Planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering. These cards are notoriously hard to evaluate in addition to being the literal face of the game. And with almost 300 unique Planeswalkers printed to date, it is time to find out which is the best Planeswalker in Magic the Gathering. Before we begin, remember to like the video if you liked it and subscribe for future content. Let's begin. Coming in at number 10, we have Nissa, who shakes the world. For 3 green, you get a 5 loyalty Planeswalker with a +1 of put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target non-creature land you control. You untap that land, it becomes a 0/0 elemental with vigilance and haste, and it's still a land. You can also -8 and get an emblem which has lands you control have indestructible, and you get to search your library for any number of forest cards and put all of them onto the battlefield tapped. She also has a passive ability that whenever you tap a forest for mana, you add an additional green mana to your mana pool. Nissa is a unique case because a lot of her power comes from her passive ability. Doubling your mana generated from forests, including dual lands with a forest typing, is very strong. Coupled with her +1, untapping a land and making it into a 3/3 sets this card over the top. The turn she comes down, probably 3 or 4 depending on your ramp, she not only untaps a land, but you can immediately use that land to attack, block, or tap for 2 green mana if you targeted a forest. Nissa was a beast in her standard environment, and I run her in multiple commander builds simply as a mana doubler. Her -8 ability is crazy, especially paired with anything with landfall, and it even gives you an out to Armageddon-like effects by making the lands indestructible. Nissa is a strong walker that can take over a game and is mostly held back by her higher mana value and dependence on specifically forest lands. In the number 9 spot, we have Ugin the Spirit Dragon. For 8 mana, you get a 7 loyalty Planeswalker with a +2 of dealing 3 damage to any target, a -X ability where you exile each non-land permanent with 1 or more colors with a converted mana cost of X or less, and a -10 where you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, and put 7 permanents from your hand onto the battlefield. Ugin is a beast of a Planeswalker and is mostly played as a board wipe due to his -X ability. In control builds, Ugin comes down, clears the board, and starts throwing 3 damage at anything he wants to each turn until he uses his ultimate. His +2 is actually a reference to the card Ghostfire, which includes the first mention of Ugin in its flavor text. I think I have used Ugin's -10 ability more times than any other Planeswalker's ultimate, as he only requires 2 activations of his +2 ability to get there. His ultimate doesn't just say I win, however, but 7 free permanents, including a second copy of himself, will most certainly cement a victory. Ugin is another walker that is held back by his high mana value. 8 mana is a lot, even if it's generic. As such, you'll usually see him in control or ramp builds that will eventually build up to him. Ugin certainly would place higher if he were a single mana cheaper, because then you could use the Tron lands to get him out by turn 3, but as such, he will be in my number 9 spot. At number 8, we have Karn the Great Creator. For 4 mana, you get a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. His +1 turns one of your non-creature artifacts into an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its mana value. His +2 lets you grab an artifact you own from outside of the game or in exile, reveal it, and put it into your hand. He also has a passive ability. The passive is situational but good, shutting down mana rocks, equipment, and the occasional creature. The +1 is simply the worst of its effect, as typically you don't want your artifacts to be creatures because they're more vulnerable to removal that way. It is good to combo with liquid metal coating or liquid metal torque, though. You can turn your opponent's lands into artifact creatures, which will immediately die because they're 0/0s, so that's fun. The best use of Karn is his -2 ability. Not only does this let you get back anything hit by swords or path, but it lets you look outside the game to grab any card you want, which in Commander officially doesn't work, but you can always rule 0 that. In 1v1 formats, it grabs a card from your sideboard, which enables it to grab silver bullet cards to out your opponents. Important combo pieces can be grabbed as well. Even a liquid metal coating can be grabbed if you want to continue on the land destruction path. Karn the Great Creator is a very niche card. It wants to be built around, and decks that are built around it can be very powerful. However, as a niche pick, I can't really put it higher than the number 8 slot on the list. Salting the roads into the number 7 spot on the list is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. For 5 mana, you get a 4 loyalty Planeswalker with a +1 to draw a card and untap 2 lands at the beginning of your next end step. A -3 where you can put a non-land permanent into its owner's library, third from the top, and a -8 ultimate which gives you an emblem where whenever you draw a card you get to exile any target permanent an opponent controls. Teferi, as he's known by the community, is an obscene control Planeswalker. His +1 means he's card neutral off of 1 activation and provides card advantage starting on his second use. The card draw isn't the main point though. You untap 2 lands at the end of each of your turns. This lets you tap out and still hold mana up for counterspells. With this ability, he doesn't need to protect himself as you're drawing into counters, board wipes, and kill spells which will protect him. His -3 on surface level puts a threat back into its opponent's deck. This is great for removing indestructible or otherwise hard to deal with threats. You can also target himself with this. As you're in control, you can always put him back into your deck, and if you're out of win conditions, you can simply stall out until your opponent's deck out. All the while you draw, replay, and activate Teferi targeting himself each and every turn. The ultimate is the most control effect I have ever seen. No, it doesn't win you the game on the spot, but you can exile all of your opponent's things, including their lands. All the while you just sit there, playing the most salt-inducing control deck that you can. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria is my number 7 slot on the list because while he is strong in control, he can quickly be overrun by faster decks who don't care about the card advantage he's trying to generate. At number 6 on the list, we have another Teferi, Time Raveler. For 3 mana, you get a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. His +1 reads until your next turn. You can cast sorcery spells as though they had flash, and his -3 reads return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand, and you draw a card. He also gets a very powerful passive. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. If you thought Teferi was bad, T3 Fairy is worse. Coming down early with a lot of loyalty, Teferi Time Raveler passively shuts off your opponent's instant speed interaction. This means that even if the opponent held up mana to bolt him, they won't be able to until their next turn. In control mirrors, this prevents your opponent from ever using a counterspell and can just win you the game if it's allowed to resolve because of how much of their deck it just simply turns off. His +1 allows you to play your sorceries with flash speed, which is good, letting you use your sorcery speed card draw spells or removal if it at the most opportune times. His -3 though, that removes a threat, puts it back into their hand, and gives you a card as well. This level of card advantage and tempo is absolutely fantastic. Teferi is banned in both Pioneer and Explorer formats due to the repetitive gameplay that he allows, because his passive ability is so powerful at turning off interaction from your opponents. Teferi Time Raveler is a powerful Planeswalker and definitely earns his number 7 slot on the list. Halfway through the list, we have Karn Liberated, 7 mana for a 6 loyalty Planeswalker, +4, target player exiles a card from their hand, -3, exile target permanent, and -14, you restart the game, leaving in exile all non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn, then you put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. First off, Karn is typically played off the Tron lands, which were specifically designed to generate 7 mana, so you can have him out as early as turn 3. His +4, 4, exiles a card from a player's hand. Now normally you target your opponent stripping down the resources from their hand over a few turns, but you can target yourself as his ultimate lets you restart the game, but also put all the permanents into play that Karn exiled. This means you can exile another copy of Karn himself and have him start the game when the game is restarted. Getting his ultimate off does not win the game. It restarts it, but you'll be so far ahead of the next or sub game, it's almost impossible for your opponents to win. His -3 also helps us out by not only acting as a fantastic removal option, but fueling his inevitable -14 ability. Karn Liberated is a powerhouse card and is almost always played with the Tron land package. He is another one where it isn't unreasonable to expect to ultimate him, but it also occurs often enough that you have to plan around it. The only reason he isn't higher on the list is his dependent on ramp or the Tron lands to get him out early, At number 4, we have Wrenn and Six. For a red and a green, you get a 3 loyalty planeswalker with +1 to return up to 1 target land from your graveyard to your hand, a -1 ability where you deal 1 damage to any target, and a -7 ability that gives you an emblem which gives instants and sorceries in your graveyard retrace. This is a 2-mana planeswalker that doesn't suck. Sorry, Tibble. The -1 is nice. It helps clear the board of mana dorks and monkeys that are running around, but the main reason to play W6 is the +1. In 1v1 formats like Modern, they are dominated by fetch lands, and Wrenn lets you play fetch lands over and over each turn. Fetches let you shuffle, lower your life total for Death Shadow-like effects, and they fix your mana. And doing all of this each and every turn starting from turn 2 is stupidly powerful. If you're interested, there is a video from the professor that I will have in the top right now that goes into further detail as to why fetch lands are so powerful. Fetch lands are so powerful that in fact Wrenn and Six is so powerful that it actually got banned from the legacy format. The ultimate ability is nice. Retrace lets you discard a land card in addition to paying other costs to give an instant or sorcery in your graveyard essentially flashback, but it doesn't exile. It's nice. I'm sure someone has used the emblem before, but really that +1 is the point of the card, with the -1 ability being a powerful but secondary effect to help you control the board. Wrenn and Six is a proof case that a 2-mana planeswalker can work and be powerful even if the individual abilities aren't game-breaking by themselves. Wrenn and Six definitely earns the number 4 slot on the list. Making the cut into the top 3, we have Liliana of the Veil. For 3 mana, we get a 3 loyalty planeswalker. Her +1 makes each player discard a card. Her -2 makes target player sacrifice a creature. And her -6 is separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. Liliana of the Veil is an efficiency machine. Her +1 synergizes well with Black's targeted discard effects like Thoughtseize to strip your opponent's resources out of their hands. Her forcing you to discard isn't that big of a deal, especially if you're pitching something to make your Tarmogoyf bigger, something with flashback like Lingering Souls, or dredge pieces that you want in the graveyard anyway. Her -2 ability is non-targeting removal and is the bane of slippery Bogle decks that rely on hexproof, but can also snipe powerful utility creatures. Her mana value being 3 means that after you edict your opponent, they'll likely have very few answers for her right away, letting you grind out the opponent's resources turn after turn. Her ultimate is like a Factor Fission on undead steroids. On average, getting rid of half of their stuff, including their lands, is unbelievably powerful. Also, you can Dark Ritual into Liliana on turn 1 if you really wanted to. That sounds fun. Liliana is a critical support role in many decks because her abilities, while simple, have great synergistic opportunities and are very effective for the overall cost of the planeswalker. She definitely deserves to be in the top 3. In the runner-up spot is Jace the Mind Sculptor. For 4 mana, you get a 3 loyalty planeswalker with 4 abilities. The +2 lets you look at the top card of target player's library, and you may put that card on the bottom of the library. The 0 ability, draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. -1, return a creature to its owner's hand, and -12, exile all cards from target player's library, then that player shuffles their hand into their library. To begin, if you haven't seen the Ristic Studies video on this card, go check it out. Card in the top corner. Jace the Mind Sculptor is Control's best friend. The +2 Fate seals a player, smoothing out your draws if you target yourself, or disrupting your opponents, and also giving you crucial knowledge of what they're going to be drawing. The 0 ability is literally Brainstorm. Brainstorm is a great card, and Jace can do it for free every single turn. The -1 bounce ability is good. It's Jace's only means to defend himself. It only hits creatures, which isn't ideal, but you get all the other ability options as well. The -12 is the most I win the game ultimate I have ever seen. Instantly milling out a player's entire deck, and their hand is now useless as it's put into their library and they have to draw one of the cards each turn. You're just really not coming back from that ultimate ability. Jace was recently unbanned from Modern and hasn't done much, mostly because of power creep, but there is no denying the power of the original Mind Sculptor. He definitely earns the number 2 slot as the second most powerful planeswalker. And in the
number 1 spot, to no one's surprise, is Oko, Thief of Crowns, a 3-mana planeswalker with 4 starting loyalty. +2 creates a food token that you can sacrifice for 3 life at the cost of 2 mana. His +1 turns an artifact or a creature into a green elk. They lose all of their abilities and their base power and toughness becomes 3/3. And he has a -5 where you exchange the control of target artifact or creature you control and target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. Oko has everything. Starting with the fact that he's green makes it so much easier for you to play him on turn 2 by just playing a mana dork on turn 1. His +2 makes a food token. Doing so when he first comes down will put him at a huge 6 loyalty counters for subsequent turns. The food token is great for his other abilities as well. The +1, which R&D has straight up said is a mistake and should be a -1 instead, turns an artifact or creature into a 3/3. This can target your stuff. The mana elf you used to play on turn 2, it's now a 3/3. The food tokens that he makes, 3/3s. But because it can target your opponent's stuff, it can turn all of their win cons into 3/3s. No destruction, no exile. It just loses all abilities and becomes a 3/3 elk. The -5 ability steals opponents' utility creatures and smaller threats. Often you'll give them a food token in exchange. While strong, it's not really the ultimate ability like Jace the Mind Sculptors. It's more of a situational effect. Oko is the most efficient planeswalker. It shuts down any threat your opponent has. It makes its own threats. It has way too much loyalty. It comes down early. It is banned in everything except for Vintage and Commander. Oko, Thief of Crowns, is unquestionably the most powerful planeswalker in Magic the Gathering. Well guys, that's it for today's video. Remember to like the video if you liked it and subscribe for more videos just like this one. What did you think of my placements on the list? Do you agree? Do you think someone else should have taken the number 1 spot? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks guys.